If you're not interested in devoting some time to a discussion about the YouTube atheist community, then this video isn't for you. Thanks for stopping by, but go elsewhere. It's strange how many people who have the internet at their fingertips will go to a YouTube video or a live stream and complain about how they don't want people in that tiny little nook of the internet to talk about whatever subject isn't interesting to them at the time. You're on the internet. Go watch some pornography, read some blogs, view some other billions of hours of video and live streams that are at your disposal, if you don't like the topic of discussion that you willfully clicked your way into listening to in the first place. Okay, now that's over. This is primarily a video response to Richard Coughlin, a YouTuber who I've enjoyed a great deal for several years now, and I'd like you to watch his, I think it's like 28-minute long video that I've linked below before watching my response, but it won't be entirely necessary. I'm not disagreeing with the majority of what Coughlin has to say in his video. I do disagree on some minutiae, but for the most part, my disagreement isn't with the problems that he's indicating. It's with the conclusions that he's come to based on those problems. And everyone is free to conclude whatever path is best for himself or herself, so I'm not really critiquing that decision of his, but I'm going to explain for him and anyone else who chooses to listen why I choose to act upon the matter differently. Coughlin has become disenfranchised with what I don't have a problem referring to as the atheist community on YouTube. Many people get hung up on that term, community, but I actually think it's an appropriate term because I use it in a very general sense. Many argue that we can't call it a community because the only things that everyone has in common are that they don't believe in God and they're on YouTube. They don't share the same opinions on a plethora of other political, social, moral, and philosophical issues and so forth. However, what community is that not true for? The only thing I have in common with the people who literally live in the same community as I do is that we live in the same place. I'd be hard-pressed to find a handful of people in my residential community who agree with me on even the majority of my core principles, and that's fine. We still share a living space and we still interact with each other, and I still get a sense of community from both debating other members of it at a local school board meeting and from exchanging a friendly wave with my neighbors. The problem comes when people use the term community to suggest that everyone therein should get along and therefore shouldn't have public disagreements with each other because it fragments the holly-jolly sense of community. When people do that, as Coughlin mentions, it's fucking stupid, and I can see why it drives some people away from that term. However, the conclusion that I draw from that is to explain to those people that dissent within communities strengthens them more than it weakens them. Diversity of opinion that gets vocalized prevents us from adopting a lemming mentality, and I happen to appreciate being challenged as much as I appreciate those who listen when I challenge them. As someone who posts poetry on YouTube, I'm technically a member of the YouTube poet community, but that doesn't mean I have to agree or disagree with everybody who's in that community. It just means that we share that thing in common. Now, Coughlin mentioned videos which disprove and essentially humiliate creationists, which so many atheists seem to enjoy watching, as unproductive, because they're low-hanging fruit, easy targets. That last part is certainly true. Even a basic amount of genuine research will obliterate the arguments of most creationists. So, for someone who's been exposed to watching those arguments be dismantled for years and years, it makes sense that the person doing the dismantling would be considered aiming at an easy target or doing something unproductive and not even entertaining as the novelty of it is worn off. Point taken, but here's why I think it's valuable for people to continue responding to creationists. The creationists keep talking. And if that talking happens in their church, I'm not going to do anything about it, other than recommend young people who ask me about creationism to do their own research. I do sleep better, though, knowing that when people who are new to the topic or who've been completely indoctrinated first come to the internet and stumble upon a video that promotes creationism, there'll be 3 or 5 or 10 videos right next to it calling out every line of bullshit there is. Now, I do think that the sting and aggression of ponage videos is often an unproductive way of handling that. Most people don't absorb education well if they're being slapped in the face with it rather than having it politely offered. That being said, I contend that different people are reached with different methods. Some people are in column A who are embarrassed into doing actual research and wind up proving themselves wrong and they change their positions. While others are in column B and they're driven away entirely by the aggressive humiliation tactics. And there are people in between. I feel there are more people in column B, so I make videos and arguments accordingly, though I do acknowledge the value of people existing who appeal to column A. With that, I consider the significance of some kind of atheist movement to be underplayed by Coughlin in his video. He considers it insignificant compared to the civil rights movement or the environmentalist movement because the atheist movement mostly exists on the internet. He rightfully indicates that to have a movement, you have to fucking move. I disagree with his claim that no movement is on the internet because the amount of people on the internet is staggering, and I think people have moved. People who have kept their mouths shut and went along to get along for years have seen a place that they can come and talk about their honest position and not feel crazy or guilty or ashamed about it. In that process, they found people who have inspired them and who have enraged them. I regularly receive encouraging messages from those who tell me that a combination of videos from users, including me, have led them to change their minds entirely about faith or religion or the entire concept of God. Some have simply learned to not feel ashamed about their disbelief, and now they live more comfortably thanks to those kinds of videos that they found online. The quantity of Americans, a country saturated in religion, who identify as having no religious affiliation has grown significantly over the last decade. I consider that to be movement. Now, are there physical parts of the movement that I disagree with? No doubt. Is the American Atheist Organization doing things like taking people to court over the 9/11 cross, a waste of time and money that just makes atheists look like douchebags? In my opinion, yes. And so we are free to come onto YouTube or blogs or whatever slice of the internet we call home and call them out on it too, as many have. I think that continuing to vocally disagree with those who do things we find foolish, be they theist or not, is the best course of action. So I prefer to do that rather than disassociate myself with the concept of being an atheist YouTuber altogether. This is something Coughlin has done for as long as I can remember, and I can understand why people's resistance to it has worn at him. Now, Coughlin very accurately critiques the embarrassing amount of atheists who behave as if not believing in God gives them some entitlement to the intellectual high ground over anyone who does. What can I say? Doing that is stupid and counterproductive. It doesn't make people interested in changing their mind to adopt the same position you hold. It just makes you look like a jackass. It's particularly typical of those who just suddenly found themselves free of a religion that has environmentally beat them over their heads for their whole lives. Their parents, teachers, friends, pastors, and family have told them that they'll burn in hell for eternity if they don't believe in a God that they don't feel comfortable believing in, and scolded them whenever they were questioning about it. Now, they've found this massive pocket of digital confirmation that they're not the crazy ones after all, and they're inclined to shout from the rooftops what a dumbass everyone else was and how smart they were for knowing better all along or for having found a way out of their indoctrination. They've lost track of or simply don't comprehend yet the cognitive dissonance that allows people to be irrational, foolish, or even downright idiotic about one thing while otherwise being entirely rational and intelligent. It's easier to just label someone as completely stupid because they believe in something you understand to be foolish than it is to understand, realize, or even entertain the possibility that perhaps that one thing is the only thing you've made a more intelligent decision about. It's possible that you're an atheist, someone else is a Christian, and that someone else is smarter than you in every other capacity of intellect. Now again, my philosophy is not to abandon my place amongst YouTube atheists for fear of being associated with so many people guilty of such embarrassing behavior, but rather to call them on it and explain why that's foolish behavior, as I hopefully just did. Since Coughlin brought it up, now would be a good time for me to officially agree that atheists calling themselves rationalists, freethinkers, pearls, and fucking brights is asinine, which relates to my previous comment. People like James Randi and Richard Dawkins have called themselves names from that list, and they're really smart guys. Doesn't mean they can't be stupid about some things. Coughlin's right. Calling yourself a bright or a rationalist just because you don't believe in God and you think all of your conclusions are drawn from solid evidence, as it's just as absurd as slapping a name tag on your chest that says, "Hello, I agree with myself." Perhaps the most frustrating element that Coughlin brings up is how commenters can't stand seeing him defend religious people. They legitimately accuse him of being soft on Islam or a closet Muslim because the list of people he's willing to stand up for doesn't exclude theists. I find that a reason to respect someone, not the opposite. He has no problem calling out atheists on their bullshit, even though he too is an atheist, and he has no problem defending Christians or Muslims, even though he's not one of them. This should be common sense. If you're in the school of thought that an atheist who calls out another atheist or defends a theist is automatically in the wrong, then you're just as bad as an extreme feminist who chastises any woman for agreeing with any men on anything. Religion is a vast, complex issue. It's interesting to talk about and debate over, but it's not the solitary defining element of a person and who that person is, even if they claim that to be the case. I personally know devout Christians who believe God talks to them, and they go to church at least 4 days per week. They believe I'm going to burn in hell. However, they are willing to help me if I need help. And they would stand up for me if they knew a fellow Christian were against me, was wrong, and if I was right in that situation. If you want to be taken seriously as a model for what society should become, you have to at least be as good as those particular devout religious people. It's my concluding opinion that the atheist YouTuber is just one part of who I am, and it's just one of countless demographics to which I happen to belong that I involuntarily share with droves of people who do not accurately represent my own stance, feelings, or approach on most issues, and with whom I frankly would rather not be associated. But my preferences do not dictate reality. Whether or not I like it, I am associated with them. So, at least for now, I'm resolved to do what Coughlin has done up to this point, which is to be the best example I know how to define myself lest I be defined, and to not disassociate from but converse with those with whom I deeply disagree. I'd encourage others to do so as well.